My nose tells me stories humans can't hear. Fear has a scent, sharp and metallic, like pennies left in the rain. Love smells warm and sweet, like fresh bread. But the smell that's been filling our home lately, it's different. It's the scent of a heart that's forgotten how to trust itself. Why do humans doubt the very thing that makes them most beautiful? Their ability to love imperfectly. I sit by this door every evening now, waiting. My human stands out there in the hallway, and I can smell her sadness seeping through the wood. She's afraid to come home to us, afraid to face the tiny human who needs her. But she doesn't understand what I understand, that fear and love often smell exactly the same. If humans could smell emotions the way we do, would they realize that being scared of love just means love matters more than anything else? I am Leo. My world is built on scents, sounds, and the steady rhythm of Grace's heartbeat when she lets me rest my head on her chest. We've shared 1,095 sunrises together. I count them the way dogs count everything important, in moments of joy and warmth. Grace adopted me when I was small enough to fit in her cupped hands. Back then, her scent was simple: vanilla perfume, coffee, and something I've learned to recognize as contentment. She would work at her desk while I chewed toys at her feet, and every hour, like clockwork, she'd reach down to scratch behind my ears. "Good boy, Leo," she'd whisper, and my tail would drum against the floor like applause. Humans don't realize how much of their emotional world we dogs absorb through our noses. Grace's happiness used to smell like sunshine on clean laundry. Our apartment became our universe. I learned that the creak of the third floorboard meant she was getting up for her morning coffee. The jingle of her keys meant adventure. Walks to the park where I could chase squirrels and she could laugh at my failures. The sound of her drawing tablet meant quiet time, when I'd curl up nearby and dream of tennis balls while she created beautiful things with colors I couldn't see but somehow felt. Then Michael arrived, bringing new scents, leather from his work shoes, a different kind of soap, and most importantly, the warm, safe smell that came when he made Grace happy. I learned to love him too, because love multiplies in a home the way light multiplies when you add mirrors. His laugh was deeper than Grace's, and when they'd sit together on our couch, their combined contentment created a fragrance that made me drowsy with peace. Dogs understand pack dynamics differently than humans think. We don't just accept new members. We absorb their emotional signatures, learning to love them through the people we already love. When Grace's belly began to grow round, everything changed again. New smells arrived daily. Vitamins that made her breath taste like metal. Creams that smelled like flowers but felt thick and strange under my nose when I tried to investigate. But the most interesting change was in Grace herself. Her scent became layered, complex. Excitement mixed with worry, joy tangled with fear. Love so intense it sometimes smelled like panic. I've learned that human emotions rarely travel alone. Joy brings anxiety as a companion. Love carries fear in its shadow. The bigger the emotion, the more complicated its scent. During those months, I became Grace's shadow, following her from room to room, sensing the changes in her body and her heart. She talked to her growing belly while I listened, my head resting on her lap. "Leo's going to be such a good big brother," she'd say, and I'd wag my tail, not understanding words, but understanding love. But as Emma's arrival grew closer, Grace's scent began to shift again. The contentment faded, replaced by something sharper. Anticipation mixed with dread, excitement shadowed by doubt. She started having conversations with Michael that ended in silence, the kind of quiet that feels heavy on my sensitive ears. Sometimes I wish I could tell humans what their scents reveal about their hearts. Grace was falling in love with someone she'd never met, and it was terrifying her. Then Emma arrived, and suddenly I understood why Grace's scent had been so complicated. The tiny human brought a whole new emotional landscape into our home. The night Emma was born, I waited by the door for 18 hours. I counted each passing minute by the changing light. My nose pressed to the crack where Grace's scent lingered faintly. When Grace finally came home 3 days later, everything was different. She moved carefully. Like her body was a puzzle she was still figuring out how to put together. But it was her scent that told me the real story. The vanilla and coffee were still there, but they were overwhelmed now by something I'd never smelled before. It was sharp and sad and scared all at once. Fear has many scents, but maternal fear is unique. It smells like love that's terrified of itself. Emma's arrival brought sounds I didn't understand. Tiny cries that made every instinct in my body want to help, but I didn't know how. Grace would hold Emma, and I could smell her confusion, her overwhelming sense of not knowing. The tiny human smelled like milk and new skin and something pure that made me want to protect her. But Grace smelled like she was drowning. Dogs are born knowing how to comfort, but humans seem to forget this instinct when they need it most. The first time I noticed Grace's new ritual was on a Tuesday that smelled like rain. She'd gone to something called a pediatrician appointment. I learned this phrase because it made her anxious for hours beforehand. When she came home, she stood in our hallway, and I could smell her through the door. That sharp, metallic fear mixed with something else. Shame. It smelled brown and heavy, like old leaves rotting. Shame has the worst scent of all human emotions. It smells like something dying inside a person. I pressed my nose to the crack under the door and whined softly, trying to call her home to us. I could hear Emma inside, making those tiny sounds that meant she needed something. But Grace didn't come. Minutes passed, many minutes. I could smell Grace's tears through the wood, salt and sadness mixing with that terrible brown shame. If I could speak human words, I would have told her, "You smell like love, even when you're afraid. Especially when you're afraid." When she finally entered, Grace moved like she was made of glass. She tended to Emma with mechanical precision, changing, feeding, rocking, but there was no warmth in her movements. I could smell the disconnect between them, like two radio signals that couldn't quite find the same frequency. I began to understand that humans can love someone desperately and still feel separated from them. It's a kind of heartbreak that has no cure except time and patience. Night after night, the pattern repeated. Grace would return from errands or appointments, and she would stand in that hallway, afraid to enter her own life. I started positioning myself by the door earlier and earlier, determined to be the bridge between her fear and her home. Dogs have a gift humans have forgotten. We know how to wait without judgment. We can hold space for someone's pain without trying to fix it or explain it away. The worst night was in December, when snow was falling like tiny cold stars. Grace had been to a support group. Words that smelled like hope and desperation mixed together. She came home smelling different, raw and exposed, like a wound that had been cleaned but not yet healed. That night, she stood in the hallway for so long that Emma's tiny cries became urgent, desperate. I could smell Grace's internal battle. Love pulling her forward, fear holding her back. Her scent was a chaos of conflicting emotions, and I realized she was fighting a war inside herself that she was losing. Sometimes love isn't enough to overcome fear. Sometimes you need someone to sit with you in the fear until it becomes bearable. I made a decision that night. Instead of whining or scratching at the door, I lay down in the hallway on the other side, pressing my body against the wood. If Grace needed to stand in that space between fear and love, then I would stand there with her, separated by inches of wood, but connected by something stronger. When Grace finally opened the door that night, her scent hit me like a wave, salt, tears, exhaustion, and underneath it all, a fragile note of something that might have been hope. I've learned that human breakthrough doesn't smell like triumph. It smells like surrender. Emma's cries had reached that pitch that makes every creature with maternal instincts want to respond. But Grace just stood in the nursery doorway, frozen. I could smell her internal battle intensifying, love and fear locked in combat, neither able to win completely. Fear told her she would hurt Emma by touching her. Love told her Emma needed her touch. I could smell the war between these truths. Grace's hands trembled as she reached toward Emma's crib, then pulled back. "I can't," she whispered, and the words smelled like giving up. "Look at her, Leo. She's perfect, and I'm broken. What if I break her too?" Humans have such strange ideas about brokenness. They think it makes them dangerous when it actually makes them more capable of gentleness. I did what I always do when Grace needs anchoring. I pressed my body against her legs, solid and warm, and utterly committed to staying. My weight against her was an anchor, a reminder that she wasn't alone in this moment, even when she felt most isolated. Dogs understand that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to leave. That's when Grace crumbled. She sank to the floor beside me, and for the first time since Emma was born, she let herself really feel everything she'd been holding back. Her sobs smelled like relief mixed with grief, the scent of a dam finally breaking. "I wanted to be good at this," she cried into my fur. "I dreamed about holding my baby and feeling that instant connection. But when I look at her, I feel nothing, or worse than nothing. I feel like I'm going to ruin her just by being her mother." I wanted to tell her that love isn't always a feeling. Sometimes love is just showing up, even when your heart feels empty. Especially then. Emma's cries grew more desperate, and something shifted in the room's emotional atmosphere. Grace's scent changed. The sharp edge of panic softened into something else. Maternal instinct doesn't always announce itself with fanfare. Sometimes it just whispers, "Try again." I watched her stand up, and I could smell her decision before she made it. It smelled like courage. Not the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward despite it. Grace walked to Emma's crib with shaking hands. When she lifted her daughter, Emma's crying stopped almost immediately, not because Grace suddenly knew all the right things to do, but because she was finally completely present. Babies don't need perfect mothers. They need real ones. And Grace was finally being real. "I'm sorry," Grace whispered to Emma, her tears falling onto the baby's soft hair. "I'm sorry I've been so scared. I'm sorry I don't know what I'm doing." But Emma didn't need apologies. Emma needed her mother. Frightened, imperfect, learning, but her mother nonetheless. I settled myself beside the rocking chair as Grace held Emma properly for the first time since coming home from the hospital. Not with the careful distance she'd maintained for months, but with real closeness. Her scent began to change again. The brown shame was lifting, replaced by something tentative but warm. That's when I smelled it, the beginning of a bond. It doesn't arrive fully formed like in movies. It grows slowly, like a flower that's been waiting underground for the right conditions. Grace rocked Emma and talked to her daughter about everything she'd been too afraid to say out loud. About feeling inadequate and overwhelmed. About being terrified of loving someone so much it hurt. About not knowing how to be a mother, but being willing to learn. Emma listened without judgment, the way all babies do. The way all dogs do. Sometimes the greatest gift is simply witnessing someone's truth without trying to change it. As the hours passed, I watched Grace discover something beautiful. That imperfect love is still love. That being scared doesn't disqualify you from being needed. That showing up with an empty heart is sometimes exactly what someone needs. I could smell the exact moment when Grace's fear transformed into determination. It smelled like spring after a long winter, tentative but full of possibility. Dawn was breaking when Grace finally looked down at me, her eyes red but clear. "Thank you, Leo," she said, "for not giving up on me, for sitting with me in the dark until I could find my way back to the light. Dogs don't give up on our humans. We can't. Loyalty isn't a choice for us. It's who we are." But watching Grace find her way back to herself was the greatest gift I could ever receive. Humans forget that love isn't about perfection, it's about presence. They think they need to earn the right to love and be loved, when really, love is a gift that arrives whether you feel ready or not. Grace smells different now. She still carries the scent of new motherhood, exhaustion mixed with joy, worry shadowed by wonder. But the sharp edge of shame is gone. Grace doesn't stand in hallways anymore, afraid to enter her own life. She walks through our door each evening with Emma in her arms, and their combined scent fills our home with something I can only describe as rightness. Emma giggles when she sees me, reaching out with tiny hands that smell like innocence and possibility. I've learned that healing has its own scent, like rain on earth after drought, like bread rising, like hope given form. Grace started writing about her experience, sharing her story with other mothers who feel lost in the darkness of early parenthood. Her computer clicks away in the evenings while Emma sleeps and I lie beside her chair, both of us content in the quiet warmth of our small family. Sometimes our greatest struggles become our most powerful gifts to others. Grace's brokenness became her strength, her fear became her courage, her struggle became her wisdom. Michael still travels, but when he calls now, Grace's voice carries real joy. She tells him about Emma's first attempts at crawling, about the way she squeals when I gently lick her tiny toes, about the morning routines they've created together. Most importantly, she tells him she's learning to trust herself. Trust has a scent too. It smells like home. Grace keeps a journal by Emma's crib now, writing down moments of joy and small victories. The first entry, from that December night when everything changed, simply says, "Today I learned that love doesn't require perfection. It requires presence." And I think about how much courage it takes to love imperfectly, and how that imperfect love might be the most perfect gift of all. If you've ever felt like you're not enough for someone you love, let me tell you what I know. Your scent tells a different story than your fear does. You smell like love, even when you can't feel it, especially when you can't feel it. The humans who need you most don't need you to be perfect. They just need you to keep showing up, keep trying, keep loving even when it's hard. And if you're standing in your own hallway right now, afraid to enter your own life, remember Grace's story. Remember that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to love anyway. Your presence matters more than your perfection. Your willingness to try matters more than your ability to succeed. Your imperfect love is exactly what someone needs. The little boots by the door aren't symbols of failure. They're proof that you keep coming home, keep choosing love, keep believing that tomorrow might be better than today. What would happen if you trusted your heart the way someone who loves you trusts it? What if you're already enough, exactly as you are? Tell me in the comments. What helps you trust yourself when you're afraid? Sometimes knowing we're not alone in our struggles is the first step toward healing. And remember, if you're struggling right now, there are people who can help. You don't have to stand in the hallway alone. Subscribe here and never miss another story that inspires.